Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Well, when I start crying, just stop me and make me enunciate a little more so. Before I forget, thanks to Jeff, he's going to make a recording, and a CD or a copy will be available to whomever. My disclaimer is that I cry easily, so forgive me if I break down. Secondly, forgive me because this is out of my element, that it may be the order and who speaks. Forgive me. I'm just trying to do the best I can in bringing this together for someone I love so much, for two people I loved so much. I want to thank you all for coming. Thank goodness the weather cooperated. I got a phone call about an hour ago from Joel Berg. On behalf of his family, he'd like to thank everyone for their concern and care and love for attending. Where does one start? A loss for words would be an understatement. When one tries to summarize the effects that Shirley and Rabbi Berg, all Shalom, had on our community, its members, as well as me personally, no matter what's said this evening, it's inadequate for the achievements that any one man and woman could hope to do in a lifetime. Since my return to being active is so short, I'm going to leave most of this evening to those who knew Shirley and Rabbi Berg much longer than I. Until my father passed away, Rabbi Berg's name didn't come to much in my walk in this life. My father, always Shalom, had insisted that Rabbi Berg preside at his burial. Knowing my father, this was an extremely important request, and he had reason behind it. My father wanted a humble, halachically proper burial. He described Rabbi Berg to me as a man with a sense of humor, yet very pious. Needless to say, the handling of my father's burial was so respectful it touched me deeply. Rabbi Berg and Shirley wanted people to be happy. I must say they're kindred spirits to me in that regard. In private, he and I once had a discussion about love. He told me to love is to give. How prophetic is that? What lovers Shirley and Rabbi Berg were. As I mentioned before, I feel totally inadequate in quantifying their impact on me and our community. Rabbi Berg's and Shirley's sense of humor, razor-sharp wit, and warmth in their eyes will be sorely missed, but thank Hashem for memories and the incalculable, everlasting impact they had and will always have on us. A major regret of mine is that I only had a short time getting to know them. Certainly everyone here knew them much longer than I. With that said, I want to turn over tonight's remembrance with Rabbi Kaufman leading off with an El Malei Rachamim, and then to others who wish to share.
So I'll say a few words first. When I first came to town, Marshall Berg and Shirley were very welcoming. They reached out. They're happy to have my wife and I and our kids here. And one of the things I think that's been special, and we've been here almost 15 years, one of the things that's pretty special about this community is how the Reformed, Conservative, and Orthodox congregations work together. And Marshall and Shirley Berg really had a lot to do with that. I think reaching out across the denominations, across the streams, and being welcoming for everyone, and making everyone always feel at home. Marshall would always teach. He would teach when you barely had any time for him to teach. You're running out the door and Marshall's stopping you to teach you a lesson in Torah, or to teach you a lesson in Midrash, or to say something about the Jewish people, or about Israel, or about how life should be. He taught all the time, and he was a strong supporter of Israel. And the moment he stepped back from our community, we were already losing something important. We already lost an exemplar of what it means to work together, and what it means to be strong, and be strong as Jews, and to teach about Judaism and to pass it on to the next generation. Anybody who ever met him was inspired by him. I have a rabbi friend who met him when he was a young rabbi, I think in Indiana, but I'm not entirely sure. And who said, "You have Rabbi Berg in your community? That's wonderful. He's a great rabbi." Anybody who ever ran into him loved him. And Shirley and Rabbi Berg were always there to help out with anything that anybody needed in the community. They were always there. He'll be really dearly missed. Every time I think about him, think about Rabbi Berg, I remember I can hear the voice. I can say words in his voice in my head. And that's I'll always remember that voice and how he would teach all the time. I'd ask you to please rise for El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Chashkina, Im Kedoshim Etorim, Kezohar Ki Amazhirim, Et Nishmat Harav Moshe ben Chaim, Shalach lo lamo, Bal harachamim, Yastireu beseter kanafav lo lamim, Bitzro chachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, Vayanuach b'shalom, Al Mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Rabbi Marshall Berg, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
I'd like to introduce and bring up Rabbi Sandler for a few words.
I've discovered along the way that 17 years creates forgetfulness. I'm Neil Sandler. I once served one of the congregations here in Des Moines. And it is a pleasure, really. I'm sorry for the circumstances, of course, that bring Susan and me back into the community, but it's been a pleasure. We've been here for the last day, and so we've been able to visit with a number of people, and it was important. It was very, very, very important for us to return, to be present, and then to participate in the service here this evening with all of you. I want to say that my very first impression after listening to the opening words of Rabbi Kaufman was that he read exactly what it was that I had written. And there's a truth in that, not truth in terms of a fact, but that there is a kind of truth in that I am quite certain that the messages you are going to hear this evening, one after the other, will be quite consistent. And you will hear over and over and over again the same message. And that's part of the Gedulah. That was part of the greatness of both Rabbi Marshall Berg and Shirley Berg, Zichronam Livracha. So we'll hear it again and again, but let us appreciate it again and again and again. Rabbi Marshall Berg was small of build, but great of stature. Now, I know that he did not see himself in that particular way. Great of stature? Marshall was simply too modest to ever think such a thing. No. Rabbi Berg saw himself not like Moshe Rabbeinu in the book of Deuteronomy, an inexhaustible, towering figure, exhorting his people, but rather like Moses that we see at the outset of our parasha this week, Parshat Vayera. Moses had already taken a bit of a beating from his people, who didn't want him to rock the boat anymore as the people descended further and further into Egyptian bondage. After Moses and Aaron's first unsuccessful audience with Pharaoh, the Egyptian taskmasters had pressed the Israelites even harder. As a result, shortly before our Torah portion begins, the Israelite foreman cursed Moses and Aaron. "May the Lord punish you," they declared. Chastised, but really a modest Moses now comes before the Holy One in Vayera and says, "God, the Israelites won't listen to me. And you think that Pharaoh's going to listen to what I have to tell him?" Yes, it is a modest Moses that speaks to God. But it is also a frustrated Moses who wonders how he can possibly succeed with the very difficult task God has given him. Rabbi Berg knew his limitations too. He knew that he was no miracle worker who could meet all of the challenges that you and others placed before him. As his colleague here, I sometimes heard him give expression to these frustrations. But pay attention to the structure of the Torah's narrative this week. Moses expresses frustration to God, and then immediately, without missing a beat, Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron. No matter how Moses felt or the challenges that confronted him, Moshe Rabbeinu immediately heard the words and the beckoning of God, that divine call. He always knew that he was in God's presence, and that awareness on Moses' part never ceased. Neither did it for Marshall Berg. No matter the source of frustration, Rabbi Berg always moved forward. He always had another word of Torah to share, constantly aware that he was in God's presence and that his calling was to teach Yiddishkeit. But Marshall knew that he was teaching much more than Yiddishkeit per se. He used to say, "A good teacher teaches himself." Remember that? A good teacher teaches himself. And Rabbi Berg did that in magnificent ways. We saw a mensch, we saw a gute neshama, and I hope we learned. Susan and I, along with our children, lived in this wonderful community for 12 years. This summer already it will be 17 years since we departed. The fact that we have returned here, probably 5 or 6 times since we departed, is a statement about our love for Des Moines and for its Jewish community. And what we hold up as its special nature, and it was good to hear Rabbi Kaufman make mention of it before, the cooperative spirit. In my experience, now in many years of the rabbinate, an absolute unparalleled level of cooperation. When Marshall and Shirley retired and eventually moved to Chicago, something of that special nature also departed with them. All communities are dynamic, nothing stays the same, and that is true of Des Moines and its Jewish community. But in Rabbi Marshall and Shirley Berg, you and I had a treasure. Like Moses, a reluctant treasure, but a treasure nonetheless. I've never met an Orthodox rabbi who was a stronger, more committed community team player than Rabbi Berg. Because of Marshall's commitment to the community and because of his unconditional love for all Jews, He was the linchpin of the various arms and institutions of this community. And that cooperative spirit brought our community recognition and opportunities it simply might not have otherwise experienced. It wasn't because Rabbi Berg forced such cooperation or commanded compliance. It was because we knew that his example of cooperation was the right one. And it was because he deserved our respect. No. Rabbi Marshall Berg was not a commanding figure. He was not a spellbinding presence on the bima. But like Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Berg imbued his own spirit with Ruach Adonai, the Spirit of God. Marshall always knew that he was in the presence of the Holy One, and he asked each and every one of us to live with the same awareness. At the conclusion of funerals at which Rabbi Berg would officiate, as people prepared to fill in the grave, he would speak of the earth as a blanket, lovingly and securely covering a loved one or a friend, tucking him or her in for a final time. It was a beautiful and comforting image. And quite often, always in Rabbi Berg's name, I paraphrase what he said at funerals. So, I conclude with a reframing of Rabbi Berg's words, which I think are appropriate for this moment. Shirley and Marshall, a blanket of earth in Chicago now protects you. But tonight in Des Moines, your home for so many years, we add to it our words, gentle drops of memory, love, and respect. May they help you to rest securely, and may they help to console all of us. Shirley and Rabbi Marshall Berg are now at peace. Tiyu nishmotehem tzurot b'tzor chaim, v'yu zichram beruchim. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may their memories be only for a blessing as we join together in saying, Amen.
I received a couple letters that I'm going to read. One from Rabbi Billel. Moshe, the name that defines leadership. We first encounter the greatest leader of the Jewish people in last week's Torah portion. The leader that was going to guide the great nation of the Jewish people through the birth pains of its establishment, confronting some of the greatest communal and political challenges that leaders could face, and Moshe prevailed. Rabbi Berg of blessed memory, Hebrew's name was Moshe. Parallels of leadership ever apparent, guiding people in the deserts of Jewish metropolises, whether in Texas or Iowa. His demonstration of Jewish community and unity, always at the forefront of anything he did. Rabbi Berg was not just an encyclopedia of knowledge, a mind of great puns and wit, but it was his knowledge that he combined with the very essence of who he was, is what made him the person and rabbi he is known and will be remembered for. Rabbi, along with Shirley, were always taking care of people, always on the lookout for anyone that needed help. Anyone who spent just a minimal amount of time with Rabbi were bound to hear him mention the mitzvahs of people's obligation to love each other. But Rabbi would take it to steps further and understand it to even mean one must love people, animals, and even plants. Rabbi and Shirley's caring and nurturing of people, all people, no matter who or what they were, whether philosophies were aligned or not, his love for fellow beings were unstoppable. Shirley, in her own right, a strong woman who touched and influenced many, the backbone and strongest fan and supporter of her husband, was a critical component to the good that has come out of the Des Moines Jewish community. Together, a power couple who were on a mission, God's mission, to touch and change the world one person at a time, affecting positive change to so many, leave a legacy that few can comprehend. Not just the people they affected, but their children, their children's children, and so on. I will remember both Rabbi and Shirley as examples of Jewish leadership and unconditional love. They leave a void in many people's lives, but they've returned back to God who sent them on their mission. A mission they have gone back and Shirley reported back. Mission accomplished. From Sid Jacobson. Sorry. Where does one begin with the Bergs? Growing up at Bethel Jacob Synagogue, I saw my share of rabbis and their families come and go, but Marshall and Shirley were very special people. The Bergs served Bethel Jacob and the community for 4 decades. My family attended many Shabbat lunches, seders, and Sukkot meals at their home. Shirley was such a gracious host and a wonderful cook. Their house was always an open and inviting sanctuary. They made everyone feel welcome and appreciated. Marshall's and Shirley's approach to the wider Jewish community was the same as that of their gracious hosting at their home. Shirley worked tirelessly with the seniors in the community, and Marshall was the most tenured synagogue rabbi and a mentor to all the rabbis who came to town. Marshall not only studied Torah, but studied language as well. His puns were notorious. I can see Shirley roll her eyes at the puns as the puns rolled off Marshall's tongue. Marshall's special laugh at the unmasking of Haman by Esther in his reading of the Purim Megillah is legendary. Marshall officiated at Susan's and my wedding. Marshall officiated at Noah's Brit Milah. Marshall tutored Rachel for her bat mitzvah and Noah for his bar mitzvah. Marshall celebrated with us the Brit Milah of our grandson, Simon. I davened with Marshall more times than I can count and learned Torah with him and family and him after daily services. To this day, I miss Marshall's Torah laning. Marshall was the ultimate peacemaker and wanted everyone to get along and accepting everyone for who they were. I cannot express the deep sorrow I feel at both their passings. They both were truly a light unto the Des Moines Jewish community and a light that has been extinguished. May the Bergs' legacy to this community be that we carry on in their name the hospitality, friendship, and true love of our fellow Jewish brethren. Amen to that. Missy?
I can write. I don't memorize anything. I have a 7-year-old with me. My short-term memory is shot, so I will be reading off of this. Thank you for allowing me to share some words this evening. I've been asked to speak to you about our love for Shirley Berg of blessed memory on behalf of the Bethel Jacob Sisterhood, specifically Sue Lakowski, Barb Leventhal-Beckerman, and Charlotte Rausch. For a while now, I've struggled to identify why Shirley's passing has really altered something in me. And I think I speak for many of us here when I say that the passing of the Bergs doesn't just represent the end of an era. It really is a break between what was and what is to be. Allow me to have a few minutes to reflect on that, because that's really what we all cherish. When Michael and I were married, Rabbi Berg performed the ceremony. He spoke of marriage as a baseball game. Michael was the pitcher, I was the catcher. And at the time, the sports analogy didn't make much sense to me, but I've ruminated on this analogy over the years, and I now see it as Rabbi Berg sharing his relationship with Shirley. He is pitching, seemingly in charge of the game, but it was Shirley, his catcher, calling the pitches: slider, curve, fastball. If you listen, you can hear Shirley. Marshall, she already knows that. She wants to know, fill in the blank. She had an easy way about of her to get him back on track, or to follow Rabbi Berg's analogy, to get the pitcher and the catcher working together to the same end. Now, I'm using the name Shirley, but her Hebrew name was Sarah. And if I had studied more with Rabbi Berg, I could tell you what numbers Sarah added up to and what the etymology of Sarah is, but that isn't necessary to show how she had the perfect name. Like our matriarch Sarah, Shirley invited everyone to her tent. She celebrated with us. She solved problems for us. She grieved with us. She stepped aside to let other Rebbitzins in town have a tent of their own. But let me tell you now, there was no larger tent than the tent of Shirley Berg. A few examples. During Shirley's tenure in Des Moines, she fulfilled many roles in our community, among which was the head of the Jewish Family Services. Years ago, when I was cleaning out one of the multiple storage rooms at Beth El Jacob, I found evidence of her work in the form of paperwork to government agencies, programming activities for the seniors, records of events, bingo cards. These were handwritten, they were typed, they were mimeographed, they were filed away. Who preferred what food? What activities were successful when someone had a simcha? She is Sarah, the matriarch, caring for her tribe. People have shared with me the times that they would have a question about halacha and take it to Shirley. No matter what a person's level of observance was, Shirley could provide advice that made sense. The Bergs always worked at finding a way to help people to the best answer that was still true to halacha. And furthermore, the example that the Bergs provided motivated many people to live more observantly, present company included. This is Sarah, the matriarch, keeping her tribe on track. Many of us who visited the Bergs know of their love for dogs. For years, they shared their home with Munchie. In later years, some of us brought our four-legged friends over for visits to the Bergs. I know that Casey, our dog, was a frequent welcome visitor at their house. He just moseyed on in, he made himself at home, and Rabbi Berg and Shirley would talk with me and pet the dog for hours. And I know that the Lukowskis' dog, Murphy, was not a stranger to them either. He helped to host them at the Lukowskis. And this is Sarah, the matriarch, caring for the least among us. And who of us didn't get a book recommendation from Shirley? I would be shocked, Benny, shocked, if you had asked her what to read and she didn't have an answer for you. She read everything. Was there a genre she didn't know? I read many of mystery on the advice of Shirley, and she read some stuff that showed you don't always know something about someone. She shared some pretty graphic murder mysteries with me, and I remember thinking, Shirley read this? And how about her mental tricks to recall the names of people? She would run through the ABCs to get to your first and last name. And truthfully, sometimes it took several people to assist in that game. This is Sarah, the matriarch, surprising us and endearing us to her. Her hospitality was among the best of her attributes. And by the way, calling out the best of her attributes is like saying that the Grand Canyon is the best of the national parks, because of course it is spectacular, but so is Yosemite and the Arches and Yellowstone. I work in technology, and I evaluate documentation on its attributes. Is it correct? Is it complete? Is it concise? Is it verifiable? And when we speak of Shirley, the answer to those is yes, 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 and yes. How many of us have been invited to the Berg's Shabbos dinners, Kiddush lunches, Seders, had a Sheva Brucha dinner held in our honor, been given something to eat or drink? Her hospitality should become legend if it isn't already. And this was a woman who was in poor health at the end and still made dinners and lunches for people. She gave people a place to stay over Shabbos, saying happy birthday to you on the phone, had no pretense in asking you to come visit. Among my most treasured items from the Bergs are a few of Shirley's serving pieces. She left me a trifle bowl. If you're not familiar with trifle bowls, they're large glass bowls, and usually you have some sort of pudding and cake chopped up in fruit. She had 3 trifle bowls. She left me tablecloths. She insisted that I take some platters. She wanted me to have these things because she knew that I liked serving, and she wanted them to keep serving. This is Sarah, the matriarch, the hostess with the mostess. How many of us ever felt like we didn't know where we stood with Shirley? We all knew. We knew these things because they were verified in all of the ways she participated in our community. She made lemonade out of lemons all the time. She never said an unkind word about anybody. She smiled when she spoke, and she found a way to include you. As for the official Bethel Jacob sisterhood on whose behalf I speak, Shirley was not heavily engaged during my tenure. She had earned that right after decades in command. And this is yet another example of Shirley's graciousness. She made room for others to lead. When Rabbi Berg retired as the lead rabbi of Bethel Jacob, Shirley stepped aside from much of the event planning and let the Rebbitzins who followed make their imprint. She let young whippersnappers like me take the reins at event planning and cooking and engagement, and she gladly shared information with us, but she let go. And let me tell you now, if you don't know, that's a huge talent to let things go. To go back to the beginning, I stated that with our community's absence of the Bergs, we moved from a state of what was to what is to be. And if I can speak to wish fulfillment, I hope that the engagement of Rabbi and Shirley in Des Moines' Jewish community has inculcated the following: that we care for each other, that we provide paths for learning, we care for those among us who need us most, we make room in our tent. God told Abraham to follow Sarah, for she was wise. This lesson should not be lost on us. We should follow Shirley's examples too.
There are two perfect people in this whole world, me and you don't look so good. Simcha, Rabbi Berg always encouraged everyone. Whatever you do with an open mind, an open heart. And which is the word simcha, joy, happy. But he also turned it into an acronym of Sim Moach La Hashem. Surrender your mind to God. You're in a tough spot. You did all you can. Let go to hold on to something bigger than life. Let something bigger than life grip into you at this very challenging moment. You can't move ahead. You can't go back. You can't go to the side. At some point, you just surrender. And that's when the miracles happen. And that's when the appreciation comes to realize sometimes being stuck and getting help from above or from an angel that the Almighty sends out of nowhere, we come to realize there is bigger than life. There is a source of all life. Every person, everyone in their Hebrew name has a verse in the Torah that starts with that letter and ends with that letter. We are told to say this verse before the Osa Shalom in the Amidah. Moshe is the verse in the Torah in Job, which is Machshavot be'etza tikon u'besakbulot asa mechama. It refers to physical war with an unbelievable, thoughtful mind, a good mindset. A healthy mindset puts you in a very centrist place to be strategic in doing war. So you got to be in a good mind. You got to be in a light mode. Like Rabbi Berg would say, lightened up. You know, don't hold a grudge. And he would always ask for his favorite breakfast when we had breakfasts by our minyan. Remember everyone? Ham. He would always ask for something he knew he wasn't going to get by Shirley's house or either our home. What's also important is to reflect on three teachings that Rabbi Berg was very known, which actually, when I was preparing, reflects his name. The first Mishnah of the Ethics of Our Father starts off with the first letter, Mem, Moshe. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe receives the Torah from Sinai, and how it is given over to Joshua and goes on and on and on, until he himself would always say, my name is Moshe Berg. Berg is in Yiddish, in English means a mountain. So Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe Har, he was the Moses that is also part of the Moshe that received the Torah from the mountain, the berg. And then we go to the second letter of Moshe, Shin. Shanu Chachamim B'Lshon HaMishnah. Our scholars taught in the Mishnah. Blessed is God Almighty who chooses in those who study the Torah that He let us study. And how we decorate and we observe and create limits and create observance to the observance, gates to the observance. Rabbi Meir says, whoever learns Torah, actually, constantly, for the sake of Torah, for joy. We know Rabbi Berg learned because that was his enjoyment. If you learn Torah for the sake of Torah, not to arm yourself, but constantly to disarm yourself, you become a vessel for blessings beyond your own imagination. And then we go to the last letter of his name, which is, what do we got here? Hu haya omer. He would say, Negad Shemei, if you're arrogant, if you use Torah to empower yourself, you will fall very fast. And one should constantly strive to add more in Torah and learn Torah. And if you waste your time, you're wasting your life. And it's almost bringing the opposite of life on you. So these are the teachings that we always knew Rabbi Berg would always say, and which is actually personifies his name, Moshe. Rabbi Sandler mentioned the Parsha of the week, the last line of today's Torah portion, when it talks about the two mighty brothers, Moses and Aaron. It says first Moses and Aaron, and then it says Aaron and Moses. And Rashi says they were all equal. Moshe, although he was a Torah scholar and brought the Torah down to us, but he was Aaron. And Moshe, Rabbi Berg, although his name was Moshe, but he had and was constantly disarmed to the service of Aaron. And we know Aaron was the high priest whose mission was to elevate the soul of the Jewish people, all 7 categories of our people. Ohev Shalom, loving peace. Rodev Shalom, chasing peace, pursuing peace. Ohev et habriot, loving the briot. He always emphasized briot. Doesn't say your Jewish brother. Loves everyone. Umekarvon Torah, and through that love, unconditional love, that is how you show everyone that they are close to Torah. They're there. Let's hope that we merit to the time of resurrection in our time, that we see Shirley and Rabbi Berg continue coming back to our community in the soul and body to continue their great work and teaching. U'macha Hashem, dima me'al kol panim, God should erase all tears from all faces. V'hikitzu v'ranenu, may we see them awaken and stand up. Those who lie in the earth, let us witness this in our lifetime. B'imheira v'yameinu, amen. So we'll ask Rabbi Sandler, Rabbi Kaufman, come join us in Kaddish. We have a sit.
Ask everybody to please rise for Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadol v'yitarash shnei rabah.
Amen.
Yamad yivrak yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chaychon v'yomechon v'fayed kol beis Yisrael. V'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei rabah v'rach v'olam v'lein almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitahar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei kudeshav v'yichu. Le'ela min kol v'chata v'shirata. Shushkata v'nekamata. Namiram b'ilma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu be'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Israel b'imru.
Amen.
May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say,
Amen.
Before I close, I do want to remind that Joel Berg in the phone conversation, some of you already know, but in the spring or summer early, they're going to be in town and we'll have a get-together. Okay, in closing, I want to thank everyone for attending, to those who shared, and especially the Federation for hosting the event, or the memorial service. Since one could go on for weeks with blessings they both brought to us, I was really torn as to how to close tonight's memorial. Then it dawned on me, Shirley and Rabbi were so extraordinarily humble. They would have screamed, "Stop already! Enough!" Yet we all know it's not enough. With that, once again, thanks to you all for coming.